All right, so here we are back in No Nut November, right? For those of you that don't know, this is an abstinence movement that started as a joke. Like No Fat Friday became No Nut November. And by 2010 to 2017, it had almost doubled in size because all those same kids that were messing around making jokes realized that there were immense benefits to not watching pornography, to not masturbating. And now here we are in 2021, and its Reddit page alone has over 100,000 followers. So this thing's really picking up movement. I know a lot of evangelicals and like people in the far right have tried to jack this idea, pick up the torch, and make it their own. I'm not even talking to you guys. You can just like exit the room with your sex negative ideologies and things that are really damaging to your children. But Gen Z, I'm definitely talking to you guys. First of all, way to pick up the mantle on something like this at a time when your teenage hormones are everywhere. For you to actually stop and say, you know, I think there's more to the connection between men and women than just sex is absolutely brilliant. For you guys to take it a step further and start harnessing the spiritual development that comes from chastity is even greater. I believe in you. What I want to do now is break down some of the terminology of sex magic and sex transmutation and some of the tantric practices that we hear about from the East by giving you some no nonsense information on what that means. I'm going to play a clip from a woman who's teaching sex magic and manifestation in a very dangerous way. Now, I don't think she's doing this from a place of negativity. I don't think she's actually setting out to harm people. I genuinely believe that she learned from a person that learned from a person that learned from a person. The problem is we in the West have a very watered down concept of Eastern philosophy. So let's watch the video, then I'll give you some no nonsense information on the practices she's talking about, where the lineage actually goes back to, and then give you some safer practices as you can do while you go through this period of abstinence. So rock with me a minute as we take the journey within.
Magic is built on the premise that your sexual energy is a type of power. So you turn yourself on and you take that power and energy, your turn on essentially, and you spin it through each of the chakras. So you go through the 7 chakras and you're spinning it through your body. And you basically have an intention if you're on your own or a shared intention as a couple. And when you get to the crown chakra, you shoot that energy out, which can be a peak experience of pleasure or it can be an orgasm into the universe. And you visualize your intention in 5 senses reality. One of the reasons it's so powerful is that most of the time when we're thinking like, oh, I want to manifest something, we're like doing affirmations or we're thinking about it a lot, which again, it's engaging your prefrontal cortex. It's the most superficial part of your mind. And so if you want a powerful manifestation, you generally want to combine 3 things. You want a very powerful visualization. So I do whatever it is that you're creating, you do it in 5 senses reality. So your whole system is engaged in the visualization of the manifestation that you're creating. And it's very sensory at the same time. You also want the deepest parts of your nervous system and your mind in alignment with the manifestation, because the unconscious, the primal mind, whatever you want to call it, like that's the one with the real power to be looking at your environment and picking up cues of where you can actually be creating and having opportunities. As well, you can want something, but if you're terrified of it and your nervous system doesn't think you'll survive it, you're never going to get it. Yeah. So what's so cool is in the tantric tradition, one of the reasons that you activate the 7 chakras is to bring your entire nervous system and body online. So in the sex magic practice, you're actually bringing your whole unconscious into the practice. So it's essentially listening because you're bringing your body with you and your whole energy system with you before you do the manifestation. And the last thing that you need is a high energy state. So being in a high state of pleasure, you've just done all this energy work and now you're having an orgasm. It's basically like manifestation on steroids.
What up, though? It's Justin. Welcome back to the Mystical Mind State. So obviously, there's a lot of information in this video, and again, I don't think she's saying all this from a place of pain, like she's actually trying to cause you to suffer. But I want to get into the actual doctrine of this and explain what sexual alchemy transmutation is, and explain its roots in the left hand and the right hand path, so we have a balanced understanding of what's being talked about here. Now, since you manifestation kids are so hell-bent on diving into occult science loosely, I figure a good place to start would be by citing the golden rule of occultists that says that for every step you take in pursuit of the hidden knowledge, take 3 steps in the perfecting of your own character. anytime you're going within and you're starting to look at the actual order of reality, the best place that you can start is by transforming yourself into a better human being today than you were yesterday. It's absolutely vital that the more you learn about the inner workings of the cosmos, you learn about the inner workings of yourself and why you respond to the world in the way that you do. Because if you don't stay anchored in humility and love, then it's so easy to get drawn into this power and this desire and this place of really, really damaging spiritual practices that will cause more harm than they will good. So, sex transmutation isn't some new doctrine. This didn't just pop up in the last 30 years. This has been with us a long time. One of the best examples of this actually comes to us from the story of Prince Siddhartha, right? Siddhartha is known as the Shakyamuni Buddha, right? He was born into a palace, into an innumerable wealth that most of us just can't fathom. There was a prophecy put on his life that said he would either become like one of the greatest kings ever, or he'd become one of the greatest holy men ever. So his father made sure to put all sorts of material wealth in front of him and make sure that he became one of the greatest kings ever, because as a father who was a king, that's what he naturally wanted for his son. Now, the Buddha went out into public and saw people that were suffering. He saw sickness, he saw death, he saw age, he saw decay, and the Four Noble Truths were born from this. So one night he fled the palace life and took off in search of spiritual understanding. In doing so, he became extreme ascetic, right? He believed that he could suffer his way to enlightenment and rejected the material world altogether. In doing so, he became very emaciated and very sick. And in that state of sickness, like close to death, he had a vision of the monkey god playing a lute. One of the strings was wound so tightly that when it was plucked, it didn't produce any sound, it just snapped. Another one was so loose that it couldn't produce sound at all, right? It just laid there limp. And the third one that was in perfect balance and harmony was able to produce a sound. From there, the doctrine of the middle way was actually born. The Buddha immediately was fed by a woman. She gave him rice milk, right, with a little bit of honey in it. It's something that's still drank amongst the Buddhist monks today. But as soon as he drank this, he became rejuvenated, right? Then he took the leftovers and he threw it into a stream. And he said, if this milk flows upstream, I will reach enlightenment. Now, what he's talking about is divine energy flows into our being from above to below, right? To make it flow from below to above, going against the stream, is to utilize that sacred energy within us to manifest into a spiritual practice, right? This is the path to enlightenment. It's not by rejecting the physical world, and it's not by rejecting the spiritual world or going to either extreme. It's in finding that balance, what Christ called the narrow way, that we're able to reach enlightenment and become better versions of ourselves. We see this echoed in the story of Joshua, where the water flows in heaps upwards as the Ark of the Covenant crosses the river, right? It's also the doctrine that Christ is teaching when he transforms water into wine. Now, unfortunately, that one's a little harder to lock down because the mystery school of Dionysus uses the same water to wine analogy, but unfortunately, Bacchanalia was birthed from that, and we saw extreme degradation of that teaching broken down into something much more sinister. It turned into a cult full of orgies and all these other things that had absolutely nothing to do with the original teachings of transforming our physical essence into our spiritual being, right? So in a physical sense, sexual energy is just chemicals and hormones, right? But mystically speaking, it's our vital life force. It's our literal essence. It's what Taoists call qi. Now, they say it's located in Jing, roughly where Svadhisthana is, the sacral chakra to Hindus, right? The two concepts are actually closely related, so if you have a working understanding of Svadhisthana, then just run with that and you'll pretty much land in the same place. King Gong meditation offers step-by-step guides into the transmutation from the physical to the spiritual to Shen, where it's manifested mentally into the world around us. And the three Dantians can be used in this way, and it's a really beautiful practice. But what they're talking about is the manifestation of spiritual energy outwards into the world around us, not the drawing in of physical desires and carnal desires into our spiritual essence, because we are spiritual beings. We house the divine. We are the temple of God. So they say that this requires abstinence because balance is vital to the Taoist belief system. Like they're not telling you to run to one extreme or the other. They're telling you to stay balanced, yin and yang. They're seeking the balance between the feminine and masculine energies within themselves. They're seeking to serve humanity, not draw in what they can get from humanity or the world around them. So to manifest material wealth or to draw in things from a place of desire is to work from a place of lust. You see this idea of edging to masturbate close to a point of ejaculation and using that energy that's developed as a way to draw things into you. This isn't Hindu. It's not Taoist. It's not the narrow way that Christ taught. It's certainly not Kabbalah. No spiritual path that promotes growth towards God will ever teach you to use your lust to create power and draw in what you desire. That's that red hot passion, what they call the white heat in some paths. So where did this come into being? Like, where did we come in line with these teachings? Most of the manifestation kids would have came to this from The Secret, who would have gotten it from the OG triple of that entire pantheon, Napoleon Hill and his Think and Grow Rich. Now, Hill cites sex transmutation is simple and easily explained. It means the switching of the mind from thoughts of physical expression to thoughts of some other nature, right? But Hill doesn't give us a source. Like, Hill doesn't tell us where these ideas come from. Luckily, we have Aleister Crowley. Like, the cat that taught us how to unleash the beast had zero problems explaining tantric practices to Westerners. In fact, he did such a good job at it that left-hand path is forever embedded in our popular culture as a result. But what he's talking about is Vamakara, right? Left-handed attainment. But again, this was meant as a balance. Yogis hardly ever start here. They come to this after years and years of meditation and spiritual discipline. They ground themselves on the other aspects before they even approach tantric practices. This is a means of desirable action. It's an outward sign of an inward desire. It's to help other people. But we in the West don't tend to cling to the things that, require restraint and things of that nature. In fact, look at what we did with the Kama Sutra. This is a book that was written on the holy union between a man and a woman, and really, really reaching towards the divine and reveling in this gift that we have in our bodies to create life. We took that and we turned it into a sex book, right? So it's really not surprising. A lot of this influx happened from Eastern mysticism because in the 60s and 70s, at the beginning of Aquarius, we saw a lot of our entertainers, a lot of our musicians, and a lot of those kinds of people looking to the East for guidance because they were looking for liberation. We lived in a very restricted, very evangelical cult almost here in the States. And in doing so, they found these practices that were more in line with what their hearts desired, and they went after them. We see that with the influx of Osho, right? This was a tantric teacher that was brought to the West and amassed a fortune teaching tantric practice to a bunch of people. Right now, they were able to terraform and do all these wonderful things, but at the same time, the group that Osho had ran a really destructive course here. They poisoned an entire population of people and eventually were shut down by the government. And on a more spiritual note, they managed to destroy any chance that we had in the West of really developing an understanding of what tantric practice could bring into our lives. Mysticism's a business. This is an industry. Look at all the prosperity preachers, the people selling systems of manifestation, self-help books, gurus that go out and do the motivational speeches and all that. I mean, 2 claps for capitalism, am I right? Now, in Tibet, they're even more closely guarded with these secrets. They hardly ever teach people in the West, and even the initiates of theirs don't get to learn about tantric practice until they've developed quite a ways. After years and years and years of meditation and study, they're introduced to the left hand, but not in spiritual and material terms. Like, they see it as feminine and masculine. Like, when they approach the left hand, They do so through the Buddha-tara, and it's a means of transforming physical desire into compassion and love for all humanity, right? It's another way of finding balance and then projecting love and peace into the world around us. So sex isn't bad, right? Like, none of these spiritual paths are saying you should feel bad because you have desire, because you have lust. It's a naturally occurring thing. I mean, it's a part of our DNA. Sex feels good because the human genome wants to survive. We have gotten progressively more beautiful as we've grown because the human genome wants to survive. To recognize beauty does not make you unspiritual. It just means you have eyeballs. Those of you that are gorgeous, congratulations, you won the genetic lottery. In Kabbalah, we're taught that God built the entire universe through use of the Hebrew letters, right? And the letters are two poles stretched between to form, right? And it's the vibration, the sounds of those letters that permeate and create all things, right? So naturally, the building blocks of our DNA were just scattered into those words, and that's how everything took form. Beauty being a naturally occurring thing, ugliness being a naturally occurring thing. One the Taoists would tell you only exists because everyone under the heavens recognizes beauty as beauty, but that's another story. The point is none of you should feel bad for having desire. None of you should feel bad for having lust. All sexual transmutation at its core is teaching you is that there's another way to use that energy, that you can direct it upwards and make it flow towards the spiritual aspects of your being. You can literally transform yourself into a more spiritual person by refraining and learning to look beyond your own desires. Since this woman is so bent on using Hinduism, I'm going to expand on some of the things she didn't talk about. The paths that sexual energy flow upwards through our being into the centers of mental energy are Ida and Pingala. They're connected from the left testicle to the right nostril and from the right testicle to the left nostril. Reverse that with the ovaries in women, and the result is the same, but it's basically a double helix that flows up our kundalini and can be raised to a higher state of being, right? Like, it can literally be a vehicle that drives us upwards towards divine understanding through conscious contact with God, right? This doctrine centers around a polysemic language in alchemy. Like, anybody who's ever read The Chemical Wedding of Christian Rosicrucians or any of the other texts that have to do with sexual alchemy, it's very difficult to read because it's so immersed in the symbolism, right? That was done intentionally, not necessarily to hide the doctrine, but so the doctrine would survive. Christ taught in parables, but think about who Christ was and is. Like, we were talking about divinity in the flesh. Divinity in the flesh understood humanity in a way humanity doesn't understand humanity sometimes. If you take the parable of the sower, you can retranslate this into 600 or 700 languages and give 400 or 500 different translations of those same 600 languages. But as long as seeds are landing amongst the thorns, or seeds are landing amongst the not so fertile ground, and seeds are landing amongst the fertile soil, the essence of the teachings will never dissipate. They'll never be able to take away from that. That's why symbolism is so important to the mystic, because it's the symbolism that actually holds the keys. Like, we see this in Buddhism even. Like, Tibetan Buddhism has what's called the twilight language. It's where they literally use symbolism to explain deeper spiritual truths. Now, to connect the two and take us from the Hindu pantheon into the Bible, I'm going to use the golden candlesticks that we found in Zechariah. I'm just going to read it out of my Bible because I don't have all of this memorized. I just highlighted the teachings and recognized it for what it was, right? Then the angel who spoke with me returned and aroused me like an awakened one from sleep. He said to me, "What do you see?" I replied, "I see a lampstand, all of gold, with a bowl on top of it. There are 7 lamps on it, with 7 spouts on each of the lamps that are on top of it. And beside it are 2 olive trees, one on the right of the bowl and one to its left." Then I said to the angel who spoke with me, "What are these things, my Lord?" And the angel who spoke with me replied, "Do you not know what these things are?" I said, "No, my Lord." "These 7 are the eyes of the Lord that range over the whole earth." I then asked, "What are these 2 olive trees on the right of the lampstand and on the left?" A second time I asked, "What are the 2 streams from this olive tree that pour out golden oil through 2 taps of gold?" He said to me, "Do you not know what these are?" I answered, No, my lord. Then he said, These are the two anointed ones who stand by the Lord of the whole earth. This is the Hebrew understanding of Ida and Pingala. The olive tree is a symbol. If you look at olive seeds under a microscope, you will recognize that it looks almost exactly like our reproductive system. This golden oil is the refined sexual desire turned into a living spiritual practice that flows upwards through these trees of life, giving us life, right? There's an inversion of this that we see in the Church of Satan's emblem, right, where it's the head of Baphomet and it's upside down. Anytime you see a symbol like the star and it's inverted, like trust and believe, it has an inverted, perverted meaning, right? And this is where the doctrine of the white heat actually comes from. This is teaching us to raise ourselves into this frenzy and then use that to manifest and draw in. That's why the star is pointed the way that it is, because you were drawing in spiritual power into your being and materializing it, which is the exact opposite of what all the other teachings taught us to do when it says it makes the water flow upwards in heaps, or the golden milk goes upwards against the stream, or the water is turned into wine. This is the actual doctrine that this woman is accidentally teaching to people. I say accidentally because, again, she doesn't look like a practitioner of the dark arts. You know, she doesn't look like one of Aleister Crowley's kids. She looks like one of the manifestation kids that jumped on the bandwagon and heard a really cool idea without any understanding of where it came from. So now that you have the basic groundwork for what sexual transmutation actually is, let's look at some of the safer methods you could do while you guys are abstaining in the month of November. The most important thing you can do is start to become aware of where your desire is, like what turns you on. Like when you see a woman's form, are you actually seeing her? Ask yourself the questions. What's going through your head? Like what's going through your body? Like just seeing curves of a woman like excites you and make you want to project your lust onto her without any actual understanding of who she is or seeing her for who she is, and vice versa. Like women aren't off the hook on this. Like we all recognize the V cut on men and know that it's aesthetically pleasing. Broad shoulders do it for some women. Like pay attention to what's going on inside your body. Pay attention to your lack of compassion for those people. Like, because when we start looking at each other as meat suits, we're no longer seeing human beings, and any chance of connecting on a deeper level have gone out the window. So awareness would be the most important practice to start with. From there, you can get into some pranayama, right? A very simple breathing technique that can be used in the morning is Om Sa. Now, understand that prana means the vital energy. Like it's just the Hindu version of chi, right? Yama means control. So it's the control of vital energy. That's all pranayama breathing actually is. Om means ultimate reality. And Sa translates to I am that. So I am that ultimate reality. I am from that essence, right? Like it is a way for us to bring that energy up into ourselves with the understanding that we are divine beings manifested in the flesh. Like this is our temples, right? We house the divine. It is the divine understanding that we are trying to reach. So to do Om Sa, all you really do is get in a meditative posture and then breathe in while saying Om silently in your head. It's pronounced more like Om, like A-U-M, right? So breathe in deeply and go Om, like in your mind, right? And then once you've reached the peak and you've held it in, say Sa on the breath out. And then repeat this process as this energy flows into your being and fills you with the understanding that this is divine essence within you. It is your gift from above. And then you share that with the world, right? And as you go throughout the day and you come in contact with people that you're turned on by, or you have these thoughts, a very simple prayer is, Lord, inflame our hearts and our inmost beings with the fire of your Holy Spirit, that we may serve you with chaste bodies and pure minds through Christ our Lord. Because Christ is the archetype in this sense, right? Christ is our example. Christ never knew a woman. He washed a whore's feet, if you can even call her a whore. That's semantics. We'll get into that at some other time. But Christ was a living example of how we are to live in our daily lives, right? So When we're asking God to inflame our hearts and our inmost beings with the fire of the Holy Spirit, we are transforming that primitive sexual energy that we have that comes from above into a living spiritual practice. Compassion of the East, right? This is how you truly walk in the way. This is how you practice sexual alchemy in a healthy and positive way. You're not taking away from your sexual desire. You're not saying that it's bad. You're learning to look beyond it and see those people, as opposed to restraining from it and telling yourself, this is horrible, I can't feel this way. Like in all the damaging stuff that you hear about in Pentecostal churches and some of the Southern Baptist churches that just teach these horrifying ideas that make kids ashamed of who they are, make kids ashamed of being human. All right, guys, so that's pretty much it in a nutshell. Next week, I'm going to get into a little bit deeper aspects of this and dive back into King Solomon. I just wanted to touch base on this because I saw that video out there and I realized that the doctrine is floating around and I need people to understand where it comes from. I feel that the most positive thing that we can take away from this is you're human, you have sexual desire, don't hate yourself for it. But if you're going to refrain, if you're going to start activating chastity within yourself and making that a part of your spiritual practice, then understand why you're doing it. Take it as a way to become more compassionate for others and see beyond your lust. Simple and plain. That's all I got, guys. Thank you so much for watching.